Very often, we'll want to execute different pieces of code within our program depending on varying conditions. We can take advantage of booleans to create conditional statements in our code. Let's begin with an if conditional statement. We construct the if statement just like so. If boolean, execute some code within a block if that boolean is set to true. Alright, now let's place something for the boolean value. How about whether 8 is greater than 5? We'll check if 8 is greater than 5, and if so, we'll console.log 8 is greater. Let's save, and there we go. We see 8 is greater show up in our console because the if statement evaluated a true condition. Now, if we replace 5 with a number greater than 8, we'd suddenly see our message disappear from the console. Replace 5 with 13, and since 8 is no longer greater than 13, we no longer see the message since the conditional evaluated to false and not true. So that covers the if statement when the condition is true. But what if we want to handle the case where the condition fails? In other words, half the time the condition evaluates to true and the other half it evaluates to false. And we probably want to execute some code whether or not we reach both conditions. Currently, we only have a way to handle when it evaluates to true. But we want to also handle the paired case when it evaluates to false, so we use the else case. Let's update this condition to say else console.log 8 is not greater. And there we go, we see 8 is not greater show up in our console because our boolean value was evaluated to false. Alright, now there might even be times where we want to handle not just true or false values, but multiple possibilities. We can handle as many else conditions as we want within one if statement by adding else if clauses. Let's illustrate by adding a variable to this example. Above the if statement, assign a variable to x. And we'll say 10 is the x variable. Then we'll simply check if 8 is greater than our variable. And right now it should hit the else case, so 8 is not greater. But we can add another case to this. Let's say else if 15 is greater than x. We can console.log that 15 is greater. As we save, awesome, we see 15 is greater show up in our console. Now in this if statement, the first case did not evaluate to true, therefore console.logging that 8 is greater did not happen, but the second case passes, and we see 15 is greater show up in our console. Once again, you can add as many else if cases as you like to an if statement, and the more cases you add, the more specific your code becomes in handling conditions. Now, if statements become very powerful when we place them into functions. Let's attempt to write a helper method that tells us whether or not a number is odd or even. Now, how could we easily check whether a number is odd or even? Remember when we discussed the modulus with operators earlier? Recall that all even numbers have a remainder of 0 when divided by 2, and all odd numbers have a remainder of 1 when divided by 2. Let's use that logic now to write our helper function. Write a function named check, which takes one number as a parameter. Within, we'll check if that number mod 2 is equal to 0, and if so, we'll console.log that the number is even. Else, we want to say that the number is odd. All right, let's add a few calls to our check function now. We'll check for, and before we save, notice that JavaScript is smart enough to do string concatenation with a number and a string when you're adding a string to a number. We'll save. There we go, 4 is even. How about a check on 7? And 7 is odd. And for good measure, let's check if 10 is even. There we go, 10 is even. Fantastic. We've thoroughly covered if statements now, and now we can graduate to another way JavaScript handles conditionals, the switch statement.